Welcome to the Clinical Teacher. Today I'm going to walk you through my assessment tool that I use with Words Their Way that automatically marks the work from your students and gives you a really easy way to sort and assess the results. I'm going to walk you through pretty much how I would use this starting from scratch with students. I've pre-filled some of the information, but it should give you a pretty clear idea of how you would use the tool. Feel free to use this one as a guide to what I've got available. You can purchase this tool through my Teachers Pay Teachers. That'll be available on the YouTube description here. There's a number of resources that I have, and more will be coming soon. So let's go ahead and start into it. First, I want to note the warning. It's on a few pages. It does note that please only modify the cells that are highlighted in yellow and surrounded with a bold box. An example of that is the student section here. You'll see that all of these sections are highlighted in yellow with bold boxes. These are the areas that you not only can modify, but you probably should. Especially in the student page, there's some of these that actually modify some of the formulas later on. So for example, the tests assigned is really important for some of the formulas, so it would be good for you to make sure that you include those. If you modify anything outside of these highlighted yellow boxes, if you copy and paste large quantities of stuff and paste it to the wrong spot, you may actually modify some of the formulas, which might render the tool actually useless. So the important thing to do is two things. One, save frequently and save multiple iterations, just in case you do make a mistake. And two, make sure you're only modifying the areas that are yellow. That's one of the reasons why I'm making this video, to make sure people can use this tool, but use it in a way that it continues to be effective throughout their time working with Words Their Way. We'll start from here. I've pre-filled most of my student information. I've got one student left here. Student 27. So student 27, I'm just going to list as test 27. Yeah, not a real name, but one that I can safely use here. I would put in my student names. I can copy and paste en masse here. I can do the same thing here. I want to make sure that I assign what tests I'm going to use. I actually use all three tests for my students. That way I get a very detailed picture of what they can and cannot spell, what features they do accurately spell, which features they don't. You're more than welcome to select any of these that you'd like, any combination thereof, or selecting just individual tests. You can then copy and paste the one, and for example, if I were to copy and paste all, I could paste that all the way down here. This sheet is locked, so it should only let you modify the areas that are yellow. Moving on, once I have this filled out, what I would then do is I would want to go to the individual student tests. And that area looks like this. You'll notice that these look a lot like the sheets that you get with Words Their Way. They're modified. There are two ways that you can actually input your student results. Now I'm going to show you the way that I prefer, which is actually using the student test that I created here. This is a digital student test, and it allows the students to actually take this test online. I usually save it to a server that the kids have access to. You can use any number of cloud-based systems to save this file and have the kids rename it with their own name. I then give the students the test, and I have them fill it in here. This is locked so that they can only modify the cells that are available. They enter their words, and then you're able to copy and paste them in. Very important. You want to make sure that your students do not use capital letters or spaces when completing this test. If they do, you will need to go back and modify them so they don't. Capital letters and spaces can mess with the formulas in there because they search for word features to mark them as correct or incorrect. So it pays dividends to talk to your students earlier and make sure that they get this correct, so that there aren't any spaces. For example, if I entered a space first, that would have come up with an error. If you do see funny errors whenever you input the information, you can quickly make a search for spaces and replace it with nothing. There's lots of ways you can get around it. If you get stuck or there's any trouble, feel free to email me. I'm happy to respond. I do love talking about these documents and differentiated instruction, so it's never something I mind discussing. Let me go ahead and pull up the student test that I've completed for student number 27. They're right here with all of their results. We'll go ahead and bring up student number 27's file. Now the benefit we have here is because I'm using the digital file, I can directly copy and paste the results in. So I can either drag and drop, Command and copy. Personally, I like the command and copy. And then it will input it in so that we can actually see the student's results right there. Now, as you can see, the second I paste these in, it does keep the formatting the way I like it, which shows these yellow boxes. And it automatically starts to mark the errors and the word features. Let me quickly finish inputting this student in. So I entered in the primary test. Now we're going to do the elementary test. And finally, we're going to do the upper test. As you can see, inputting the data only took me a few seconds. The benefit with this assessment tool is that it automatically marks the word features and the words, then calculates the area where the student falls for errors. Now, if you're using the traditional system, you're just looking for 2 or more errors within a section. I use a modified system slightly in this, and the way that I like to do that, as I'll show you by going back to the home screen. I've already entered in all of my student information, so now I can click over to the student summary, the Words Their Way summary. This shows me a summary of all of my students' results, which section they're marked in, including the number, which makes it really easy to sort. You'll see here there's a number which actually aligns with the column that they have made their first error in. So in this case, the student is in within word pattern section 10. So if I scan along, you'll see that there are labels above each set of columns. And you'll see that this student made 3 errors in section 10. That would be their first place where they've made errors. You could just use this and assign words and groupings based on this. I like to go a little further, and this is actually where this tool shines. There are a number of different sorting sections. All tests, this Words Their Way groups all, is for all the tests. Then there are 2 separate sections if you're using just primary elementary or if you're using elementary and upper. And then there's an individual set of errors showing for just each individual test. Depending on the tests that you assign your students, you'll want to go to different sections here. So for example, I've given all of my students all the tests. So I would actually go into the Words Their Way group all, and this would show you all of my students. Now I'm going to go ahead and resort these by number. Now this puts them back in alphabetical order. So the reason why we have the student number column is to make sure that we can put our students back in the original order. Now you'll see this mirrors what we had here in summary. So same order for students, roughly same spelling pattern. You can see one student pretty much missed everything across the board. And then there's a smattering of other errors here. This section is where this tool really shines. What you would do from this point is I'd probably sort them by these numbers. Again, these have to do with where they make 2 or more errors, sometimes 3 errors. I would sort by ascending, which would allow me to then see my students actually in order of where they make their first errors. And then I can place my students in their own different groups. Now you'll notice I've already assigned groups, and you can see that they work up numerically based on this sort. And I have 5 groups. And then there's a section where there's unnamed students, and I've given them the group 0. And the reason why I've given them group 0 is because essentially I want to be able to get rid of them. They haven't taken the test. I don't want them to count in my numbers or my figures. I don't need to see them, so I immediately sort them out. I do that by selecting this little triangle up here, which allows me to sort or filter any of my results. Now, sorting, I can sort by ascending or descending. In my case, what I want to sort by is I actually want to remove all blanks. If I remove that tick box, it actually takes away all of the blank sections. I could then do the same thing with any of these other groups, even selecting only 1, but for now let's just leave 0 off. Now what you can see is you see all of my students and their errors in order from lowest to highest ability. Now from this point, what I like to do is I actually work with students in just their sections. I can either leave them sorted the way they are, it doesn't really matter, because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to filter my results. And how I do that is by doing the same process that I did for sorting, except I will deselect the select all, so you'll see that none of my buttons are selected now. I'll go to group 3, and you'll now see that all of my group 3 students are listed. This allows me to just look at those students and track where their highest frequency errors are. So moving literally from left to right, from easiest to most complex, I can start to see where I have errors. Here what you can see is their first area of major weakness is here in the common long vowels OA. Now, I've created these sections here. I use them to help keep track of what I've assigned to students. I also use them to plan ahead. What I tend to do is I select what sort I'm working on. I'm not exactly sure what the long O sort would be, but let's just say within word 32. And then I would usually put the date to show that either I'm planning to teach it that day or that's the day I've taught it. This allows me to really focus my efforts on making sure that I'm adjusting these groups to focus on these students' needs. So for example, even though they're within the early middle section for within word and looking at common long vowels, the one section that they have, there's a couple sections here, they have no errors. So IE, that magic E with a long I, they don't have any errors. So it's not something that I would necessarily need to focus on with this group. Whereas if I were working in order, I might just give those students that and they wouldn't really need it. That's where I think this tool shines the best, because it allows you really to start dictating where you're going to teach. In my classes, I make sure that I'm only focusing on the areas of highest need. So I would actually skip from here probably to this pattern here. And then I would move over probably to the section in upper, because that's the next area where there's more than 2 people that have errors. So, and then I would just go in order from highest need. I tend to aim for 50% or above, but as I get closer to the end of the year, I start filling in gaps based on need. After that, what I can do, and I often do, is I'll remove this sort so that I actually have everybody again, except for those zeros. I don't need them. And then I'll look at the area that we were looking at. So we had common long vowels OA. That was the first sort that this group is working on. And I want to see everyone who has that error. So I click on 1 in the filtering section. So what it brings me is everybody who's made an error here. I'm going to then sort by ascending, because I just want to see these students based on area of need, because I was looking at students in group 3. As you can see, now that I've sorted that, there's actually one student right here from group 4 that has also made an error in this section. What I would then do for the purpose of that week is move that student into group 3, because though they are in group 4, they're the only student in group 4 who made this specific error. So I'd want to make sure that they come back, drop down to group 3 for this week to fill in that gap. It means that students that are slightly above but with weird gaps in their spelling patterns can fill in those gaps as we move through them and progress in the class. Overall, this tool I use pretty much every week to set and review goals. At the end of the year, I also use it to line these up. Let me show you one other tool that you can use here when you're assessing this. Obviously, save this as a blank document and then fill it in through the year, because as you get near the end, you're going to want to assess again. Easy way to check to see results is you can quickly compare using results by student. This is one of my favorite sections because it gives you a quick snapshot of what your students are able to do. There are a number of things that it gives you. One, it gives you your students' level. In addition to that, it gives you their column. This is essentially a numerical evaluation of 1 to 19, 19 being the very last highest area in words their way, the derivational relations, 1 being emergent, each number being a rough progression along the line. So you can actually see a numerical representation of what your students can do. So at the end of a year, when you give them the second test, you can actually line these two up to see where they fall within the spectrum, to see if you've actually developed some real growth in students. Using this tool as it is, along with the system of words their way, I've seen an average of 1.5 to 2 years growth based on the South Australian spelling test and the Victorian curriculum. So I found it to be incredibly helpful in regularly checking in with student needs and regularly modifying goals based on their needs. Please check out my Teachers Pay Teachers store. The tool is available. I'd love for everyone to be using it. I find it to be incredibly helpful. If you have any questions or any concerns, feel free to drop me an email. Otherwise, if you have any suggestions of other tools that you'd like me to have a crack at, I love creating differentiation tools that allow us to make assessments quick and easy and make it so we can really get down to the business of trying to find the things that will really help our students instead of spending all of our time marking and doing admin work. So this is what I love doing, and hopefully you've enjoyed the video and that you will enjoy the tool as well. Thanks again for visiting The Clinical Teacher, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.